And we're back. Jay Spence, upon attempting to leave the room, found himself in a situation where he completely ended the show. He wanted to apparently get in the last word, and he did. At least so he thinks. Joe, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here. I feel there's a part of me. I got to be honest with you. I feel a little guilty because I know Bruce doesn't like the off the cuffs type stuff, and I feel like I don't want to wreck his presentation.
You're not. He's looking for the debate. Bruce, is your microphone working?
Yeah, it's working. It's working. All I had to do was just kind of twist around and get the knife that you stabbed in my back out of there, and then all of a sudden the mic was working a lot better.
See, Joe?
See, he does it. I got the wait. What knife? There's no. I didn't expect Spence to show up. My ringer was Joe Marino. Like Joe.
Listen, when I saw Spence, I'm like, I'm the one that's getting punked tonight. You know what I mean? You're just playing with everyone's minds tonight here, Joe.
It's true. It's so incredibly true. Look, we're talking about value, and what I'll do, because I know that this is going to drop as a pod form for the Bruce exclusive, and all of a sudden we've got 300 people watching this thing. We went from 60 people to 300. I don't know how that happened, but maybe we should stop the show every time and restart it. But we were talking about value, and I do you want to respond to Spence's point? Because what I'll do is I'll send you both clips, Bruce, and then you can obviously stitch them together and make the transition. So I would tell you to probably just start as though Spence just stopped talking.
Yeah. So value is interesting because, like you talked about, value is not just necessarily salary. It's opportunity cost. It's what you could have spent that draft pick on. You get one first-round draft pick every year, barring trades. And because of that, you get a chance to spend a premium pick on a premium talent and a premium difference maker. So let me ask you, between the two of you, what are some positions that you would say don't ever draft in the first round? Just between the two of you. Do you have any hard lines where like, don't ever draft that position in the first round? Go ahead.
Running back.
You say running back. Okay. Joe, you can't say running back because
tight end.
You say never draft a tight end in the first round?
Kicker, says Marino.
Okay. Kicker, punter.
Long snapper.
What about like a 2-down thumper linebacker who doesn't offer any coverage ability?
Yeah, definitely. Nope. Not a chance.
What about a 1 tech who doesn't pass rush?
Nope. Can't do it.
Okay. So what about a returner, like a kick returner? Like that's it, just a kick returner.
No, can't do it.
But I don't know that you're, I know where you're going with this. I don't know that you're helping your argument. Like that's the problem. Okay, go ahead.
Bar with me.
Okay.
Why is it? Why is that? Why do we not do that? Because we accept the fact that these positions don't move the needle significantly enough to contribute to winning. We know that they help the team. There are places on the team for 2-down, run-stuffing defensive tackles. There's a spot on a team for that position. There's a spot on the team for a kicker. There's a spot on the team for a punter. But they don't move the needle enough. It's not that they don't move the needle at all. It's not like they don't have any value. They have value. They don't have enough value. Mm-hmm. So what we currently exist in this space is we're in a passing league. First off, do I even have to go into the data on why this is a passing league, or can we all just accept that?
It's a passing league.
Now, Bruce, you pass the ball to a running back, dynamic playmaker out of the backfield. The EPA per play of targeting running backs is massively less than targeting tight ends and wide receivers. Throwing to running backs isn't even that efficient. It's not even that good of a value. It never has been. This idea that you have this dynamic receiving running back and they're going to change the dynamic of your offense is false. They help, and that's wonderful. They do. They move the needle. They just don't move it as much. So having a 3-down running back and having a 3-down running back who you can throw the ball to is it's a nice thing to have. But it's never going to prioritized. It's never going to be something that you're actively trying to achieve. So if passing to running backs is less efficient even when they do contribute in the passing game, and it's a passing league, then both the things the running backs do, which is running the ball and catching the ball in the backfield and blocking. All those things that running backs do are less valuable than players and positions who actually contribute toward passing. So every first round pick, the reason why we all just agreed that 2-down thumper defensive tackles and 2-down thumper linebackers and kickers and punters and specialists and return men shouldn't be taken in the first round is because none of them move the needle significantly in the passing game.
Right.
None of them.
Right.
Neither does a running back. Running backs don't move the needle significantly in the passing game.
LaDainian Tomlinson did not move the needle in the running game, in the passing game, rather.
LaDainian Tomlinson was drafted 20 years ago.
I'm just saying, like you're telling me that some of these guys, Christian McCaffrey, does not move the needle in the passing game?
Not significantly enough relative to other positions. That's the point.
You're talking about guys with 70, 80 receptions in a year.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
That's,
and if I targeted Zach Moss 120 times, I'll bet you he could have 70 catches too.
I doubt
it.
But
it's never been efficient. It's never been efficient. If you go look up the EPA per play when targeting running backs versus the EPA per play when targeting tight ends and wide receivers,
right,
it is ridiculously bad. Like, it's something that you should only ever do as a last resort. And having someone who can take a check down is wonderful. That's good. That's a good thing. But it doesn't move the needle like throwing the ball to a wide receiver or throwing the ball to a tight end. Yeah. So the first and most important thing to talk about when you talk about running backs is they don't contribute significantly toward having a good passing offense or stopping a good passing offense. If you get a guard or a tackle or a defensive end or a coverage linebacker or a safety or a corner, every single position I just named, or a quarterback or a wide receiver, all of those people help move the needle significantly in the most important aspect of the game, which is throwing the ball.
So Bruce, if I can ask a question, and I want to make something clear here, I didn't come on this tonight to win an argument. That's not my goal. I want to ask the right questions to come to the right conclusions. And admittedly, I'm very much on the fence for this entire idea. I'm warming up to it, but I don't know if I'm there because I think I'm going to mostly agree with everything that you said. And so the main point that you just made there is this is a passing league. It's the most important thing that you can do in the NFL, and throwing the football to running backs is not, across the entire NFL, the best way to throw the football. So let me add this layer to it. Let's apply this to the Buffalo Bills. This is where I get interested in having a pass catching back like Travis Etienne. The point that moves the needle for me, and I'm interested in hearing if it does to you, is if you had Travis Etienne in the backfield with Josh Allen, I think it would affect the way Josh Allen plays the game, the way that he surveys the defense. My issue with Josh Allen, a declining issue, a minor gripe at this point, but I still think he's still too willing and too eager to take higher risk throws that are lower percentile when I'm looking for more profits. Sometimes I just want him to hit that running back that's in the flats, or a guy that if you get Travis Etienne isolated up on any linebacker in the game and you give him a two-way go, he's going to read that leverage. He's going to get open. I like what Travis Etienne could mean to the Bills offense as it would relate to Josh Allen's process of throwing the football and how that could lead to more consistency when it comes to finding profits.
I don't think that's a bad point. I don't think that's a bad point at all. I think that having somebody who can influence Josh Allen to get through a little faster, maybe instead of trying to break contain and make a second phase throw down the field, can just dump it off to Travis Etienne. However, some of Josh Allen's best plays happened that way. Mm-hmm. So I struggle a little bit with wanting to give him an easy out, especially when you consider the fact that here's what I'd love to do. I'd love to be able to take the metrics on Josh Allen's second phase plays versus the metrics of checking the ball down to a running back. Because I think that some of the biggest plays, and Stephon Diggs in the scramble drill was a revelation this year.
Yeah.
And you might take a different approach at that. You might think that if you inspire Josh Allen to take the easy profits, that you maybe miss out on some of those things that make players like him, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, the players who are the new dynamic in the NFL quarterback. Joe, you and I were talking about this before we started. That's the next wave of quarterbacks. It's quarterbacks who can win from the pocket, but can make big plays off schedule. And that's the reason why I messed up so badly when I was evaluating Josh Rosen, is because he couldn't do that. And that's what my big takeaway from that was, you got to have a quarterback who can do that. And I do think that having check down opportunities to Travis Etienne is valuable, but not at the expense of some of the special playmaking abilities we've seen.
I think that's a really good counter and layer to add to the question that I asked. Let me introduce one more point. And this, when I saw this today on my Twitter timeline, I mean, my eyes popped out of my head. It was by Eric Turner, Cover One. He put out that there's a statistic right now that over the last 2 years, Devin Singletary has 6 drops on screen passes from Josh Allen. I think there's some stuff in our heads. You can remember some of these plays, right? That happen. You're in like just inexplicable drops from Devin Singletary. So I can buy what you're selling there when it comes to second phase plays, and you would potentially be taking away some of Josh Allen's best moments. There's a lot of layers to running the screen game, but from a very elementary perspective, it's setting it up, it's throwing the ball, and it's catching it. That's not even happening when Devin Singletary is that backed. And so maybe it's not as aggressive of, oh my gosh, we need Travis Etienne at pick 30 because we need somebody that's not going to drop, 6 screen passes every 2 years. But I do think that there would be an upgrade in those moments. And again, it's only 6 plays out of, 2,000 that have been run over the last 2 years for the Bills. But how do you factor that into it?
I'll let you go. Go ahead, Bruce.
I think you factor it in by running those pass plays through Zach Moss and Matt Breida instead. That's how I think you do it. Matt Breida is perfectly reasonable receiving back, in my opinion. I think Zach Moss was a perfectly reasonable receiving back as well. I'm completely okay. If TJ Yeldon was still on the team, I'm completely okay having him run those plays. I think that a weakness in Singletary is admitted and noted, but also not necessarily in and of itself a significant enough reason to, I say overcompensate, but to take something as an extreme of a solution. It's like killing a spider with a flamethrower, right? Drafting Travis Etienne in the first, so you have somebody who doesn't drop the ball on screen passes, is a little bit like killing a spider with a flamethrower.
Yeah, but aren't you doing that same thing? Aren't you killing a spider? If the spider is you don't draft a running back in the first round, if that's the spider, aren't you killing it with a flamethrower by saying that because in the NFL, the running backs, like, it's just not an efficient EPA situation as far as like throwing to the running back when 80%, 75% of NFL teams that are throwing to the running back are throwing to the likes of Zach Moss and the likes of Devin Singletary. Josh Allen, the last dropped screen pass, to Joe Marino's point, in my mind, is one of the most beautiful loopy passes I saw. What do we know about Josh Allen? He doesn't have touch. He struggles with touch. He threw in that Kansas City Chiefs game the most beautiful loopy pass over the linebackers and the rushing defenders to Devin Singletary, to which Devin dropped it. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about 80% of the league. We're talking about getting a guy at 30 that is equipped to be a pass-catching running back, which is a different conversation than Zach Moss. If you're talking about the effect on the team, this guy is going to help Josh Allen in many ways, from being a release valve that he trusts. What does it mean to Josh Allen to know I have a high-low, I'm always going to take the high, and I'm going to be a risk taker. However, you know what? I've got this dude that I've never had before. And all of a sudden I've got this guy that I can he's going to find an open spot. I know where he's at in the flat. He's going to catch the ball. And when he catches it, he's going to take it 18 yards. What does that do for Josh Allen if he knows that he's got a guy and the guy's going to be effective? He's not going to be 75%, 80% of the running backs in the NFL. He's going to be in the 20%. He's going to be a guy that's different. What does it mean if this dude can close out football games? Like when the Bills are up by 23 points against the Rams and Josh just has to turn around and give the football to the guy, and the dude just trucks people and closes out a football game, and the Rams don't score 25 points against us, and then we have to come back against them to win the football game. What does it mean if you're dictating to defenses? In a pass-heavy league, we all agree that this is it's a passing league. If you've got a situation where teams are gearing themselves, building their teams to stop the pass, if all of a sudden Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, and Josh Allen befuddled so many amazing defensive coordinators and defensive head coaches in this league last year. Literally Robert Saleh, Vic Fangio, you name them. They were all like, I don't know how to stop this kid. And oh, by the way, now you're going to give him a running back that's going to like just blast people in the face and like be a nightmare. So they have to worry about that guy too. Where is the value in that? I don't know.
You don't have to draft someone at 30 to get that at all. There is no requirement that you do so. In fact, 16 of the top 20 running backs in the NFL were not drafted in the first round.
There's a luck factor to it. Because if we're talking about win rate in the draft, first round, 50%, right? Would you agree it's 50%? More running backs translate immediately to the NFL.
Oh, that's absolutely true.
Any other position.
Which is one of the reasons you can get one later. Because you don't need a first round to do it.
Or you could end up with Zach Moss and Devin Singletary,
who are perfectly reasonable running backs for the purposes of their jobs.
They weren't last year.
They didn't hold this offense back from being the best offense in the history of the Buffalo Bills.
They
at all.
I would agree. I would agree, but that's because is that because of their talent, or is that because of Josh Allen's talent?
That's because the talent, the running back doesn't move the needle on offense significantly enough. Last year's proof of it. That's one of my favorite things. One of my favorite things is we all think that running backs move the needle when the best offense that the Bills have ever put out is now the offense we all say needs a running back. If running backs really moved the needle that much and the running backs are really that bad, we wouldn't have had the best offense in the history of the franchise.
Agreed.
That's why they don't. They don't move the needle that much.
This is such a fun topic. And Joe, you haven't got a chance to talk in a bit. I love this topic because I was the guy at week 10, week 12 saying, stop trying to run the football, throw it. Like, this is what you do. You've got a guy, like you've got not Dan Marino, but you've got a guy that can chuck the football all over the football field and beat people. Like, for me, there's just an aspect of, because of it's situational. Is it not situational, to Joe's point? Like, we are in a situational position where 30, it's no longer a luxury pick. It's now this shit makes sense. Go get a guy.
If
Joe?
I can add something here, I think one of my biggest concerns, maybe not the biggest, but certainly high on the list, one of the things that I'm most concerned about if the Bills were to draft a running back at pick 30 is that because you did this, because you've made a premium investment in a running back, that you now feel obligated to get them the football. You know, and so you saw this happen last year with the Carolina Panthers when Christian McCaffrey was hurt and Mike Davis came in and was terrific, right? I mean, for the most part, he was really, really, really good. And as somebody who watched, part of my job is I watch the Carolina Panthers, and so I'm very in depth with what's going on there. What I thought a big difference was in that offense with Mike Davis as the lead back versus when Christian McCaffrey was there, is that there wasn't this burden that existed to get the ball to Christian McCaffrey. And if you watch the Carolina Panthers, sometimes they give the ball to Christian McCaffrey for no other reason than to just get him the ball. There's no creativity. It's literally drop back pass, flare route for Christian McCaffrey, dump it off in the flats, make three guys miss, please, so we can have a positive play. And I think that there is this burden that comes on you. Wow, we picked this player in the first round. We think he's really dynamic, and so we need to make sure that this is a prominent part of what we do. That's a concern of mine when you talk about bringing in Travis Etienne or whatever running back at pick 30. That doesn't exist right now. You pick your two lead guys are third round backs. There's no burden, right? You're not sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, we have got to maximize Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. Now, admittedly, I wish that the running backs that Brandon Beane invested in the second or day two were different players that brought different dynamics to the table. But I do get concerned that you somewhat constipate your offense when you introduce a player like Travis Etienne, or you pay big money for a running back because you have to maximize that investment. And personally, I don't want to see the Bills do that.
The fact that you can have a dynamic player like Travis Etienne and that repeated usage and forcing the ball to him can, quote, constipate the offense, like Joe just said, that's proof right there that you should use running backs. You should have them. Under no circumstance should your offense flow through a running back when you have Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. At no point. At any point. And anything that pushes the needle towards running this offense through a running back is going against everything that made this offense so successful last year. And on that note, you have to consider the dependency of the running back position. And that's one of the things you have to note, okay? It's been proven that offensive line and scheme are more correlative to rushing success than running back talent. In fact, the most correlative thing to rushing success is box numbers, which is largely a result of scheme and formation setting. That's largely a result of that. So the most effective thing you can do to run the ball effectively is keep men out of the box. That's the best thing you can possibly do, which you do through passing the ball and spreading the field. So one of two things happens with a running back when you draft them high. Either you take them and they go to a good team that has a really good support system and they have an already established offensive line and scheme, and that's really good, in which case they're able to have their production replicated by a less valuable player. So you have this happen where Kareem Hunt goes down and Damian Williams comes in and wins the Super Bowl with Kansas City Chiefs. Or when Clyde Edwards-Helaire goes down and Darrell Williams comes in and is perfectly effective. Or when Ezekiel Elliott goes down and Tony Pollard comes in and is just effective, if not more effective. So one of two things happen. Go ahead.
Wait. So I don't know where you guys stand in fantasy football. I've played fantasy football a very long time. One of the leagues that I'm in, the primary league that I'm in, has been around since 1994. That is not an exaggeration. Like literally, like we would get together at Tom Snyder's house for Monday Night Football with the box scores. We add up everybody's scores. We'd watch the football game together. 94. I don't think that's a fair argument, Bruce. And the reason that I don't think it's a fair argument is because when you've got a guy that there's no film on, they come in and for one game, they dominate. And usually the shelf at game 2 is dramatic. Oh my gosh, we have to face whatever Tony Pollard. We have no film on him. We don't know what he's going to do. Sure enough,
in all three of the examples I just gave, that didn't happen. Damian Williams, go look at Damian Williams' run with Kansas City.
A great fantasy strategy is to draft or to pick off the waiver wire the backup for running back that just went down for one game, because at game 2 he's going to suck. He's going to be down to about 60 yards like for the entire game, and that's where he's going to live because his talent level is going to come out. No game film on a player matters.
If you go look at the three examples I had, go look at Tony Pollard, go look at Darrell Williams, and go look at Damian Williams. It's there. So that's the first thing that happens. Either you have a running back who goes to a great team at the end of the first round, or goes to an already established team with a great running scheme and a good offensive line, in which case they're easily replaceable, or they go to a team really high like Saquon Barkley, and they don't have a supporting cast around them, and they don't elevate the team because running backs aren't that valuable. Either way, it's been proven running backs aren't valuable. If you put them in a good supporting cast, then they're easily replaceable.
Yeah.
And if you put them with a bad supporting cast, then they fail to elevate the team around them.
Yeah.
That shows you that they're just simply not that valuable. The top 20 running backs, 16 of them weren't taken in the first round. James Robinson is not an outlier. James Robinson is the rule at this point. Being able to find running backs in the third round, in the second round, in the fourth round, in the fifth round, being able to find Kareem Hunts and Alvin Kamara's, being able to find players like that is not an exception anymore. It happens so often, it's not an exception. We talk about Tom Brady in the 6th round, and some people are like, oh, well, let's just draft a quarterback in the 2nd. Tom Brady's an exception. Most of the good quarterbacks in this league were drafted in the 1st round. Mm-hmm. Most of them were. The inverse of that is true for running backs. Why? Because they're so dependent. Quarterbacks can elevate the team around them and can be plugged into lots of different things and have their talent shine through. Right. Running backs can't. And if you have a position that is that dependent, then why are you spending a premium pick on it?
I hear you on that. The dependency of running backs certainly relies on a lot of other factors. The concern that I would have about that, and I agree with you that running the football really does come down to a math equation. Do you have numbers in the box? The Bills had that last year, right? I used to say this stat so often in the podcast. that I could recite it at any point, but I'm not able to recall it right now. But something about how the Bills faced the most amount of or top 5 in terms of lightest box, 6 men or less in the box, and they were like 18th in yards per carry. So for whatever reason, that math formula that is tried and true, so much so that the Bills ran the ball with Josh Allen frequently enough to get even more favorable numbers, they still didn't have consistency when it came to that output. And I think for a lot of positions, I don't know that I could really identify a position and say, well, it's not reliant on other factors. Like wide receivers, you need to have a good quarterback. A quarterback has to have time to throw. He needs an offensive line. Offensive linemen independently don't matter, right? I don't know. Like I think that all the positions kind of work together and are reliant upon others.
It is an ultimate team game. There is no such thing as a position that's completely non-dependent. You're absolutely right. The question is simply the degree to what dependency you have. How much dependency? Because all of them have some level of dependency. We have seen good quarterbacks go to systems that are terrible with offensive lines that are horrible with no weapons. And then all of a sudden teams are like, well, gosh, we got to do something for this quarterback. Well, obviously, if the quarterback was capable of elevating terrible talent around him all the time, there would be no need to go out and get a Stephon Diggs. So for sure, absolutely true that every position's dependent. Running backs are simply most dependent. But the other argument I get on this all the time is, Bruce, you're too rigid. That's too rigid. Why are you drawing the cutoff on the first round? Why would you do that? Why on earth would you possibly just draw that cutoff? It's too rigid. First off, y'all being hypocrites because you all have rigid cutoffs too. The difference is mine at least has a spot where it makes logical sense.
But I disagree. I don't know that the logical sense is pick 32 versus pick 33.
Well, we're going to go through that right now.
I gave you the contract value.
Running back?
I gave you the contract.
Would you franchise a running back?
I gave the contract values for pick 30 versus pick 5. To me, 5 makes no sense drafting a running back. Pick 30.
So you have a hard cutoff too. Yours just happens to be at 5.
I asked somebody. No, it's probably around 20. I asked somebody. So I might have been you. You would not take a running back at 30. No. Would you take a running back at 34? Yes.
No.
It's like, what the?
Yes. Yeah. You want to know why? We're going to talk about this. You just said you would not franchise a running back. Joe, would you franchise a running back? Fully guaranteed franchise tag.
You can't go Joe and you can't go Joe M.
Sorry,
so
Joe Marino.
Full names.
Joe Marino, would you franchise a running back?
Would I franchise a running back? I would franchise a running back before I gave them a long-term contract.
You prefer that?
Yeah, I'd have to know my cap dynamics. If I'm the New England Patriots and I have $90 million in cap space and I'm not paying a quarterback and I don't want to pay my running back for a long term, but I really like him and I don't want to lose him and I want him for one more year, I would, right? I don't know. I think there's a lot of context that would play into it. I think mostly I wouldn't do that. But I think there's circumstances where I would, and I think that's a lot more appealing to me than, signing Aaron Jones to whatever ridiculous deal the Green Bay Packers signed him to.
Joe Miller, what's the difference between pick 32 and pick 33?
To me, there's no difference. Like literally, there's an arbitrary semantical idea of 1 versus 2, first round, second round, and it's literally 1 pick away. It means nothing.
So it actually does mean something, and it's the 5th-year option. First-round contracts are actually fundamentally structured different. It's the 5th-year option.
The 5th-year option.
And the 5th-year option has value.
It has value, but it almost adds to my argument because now you can keep a guy for 5th year.
But there's opportunity costs associated with that. If franchise tagging a wide receiver is on general better idea than franchise tagging a running back, and the 5th-year option is a mini franchise tag, then you are losing opportunity cost to be able to get 20% more of a contract out of a position that's more valuable, that moves the needle more in the passing game than a running back when you decide to pick a running back in the first round over a different position. You are losing that option. That's an opportunity cost that you have given up by taking a running back. The 5th-year option fundamentally has contractual value. Because one of the reasons why teams trade up into the bottom of the first round to try and take a quarterback is so they have that 5th-year option. They want that. They want to have that additional 20% because at the time when that contract option is exercised, it's actually markedly below market value for a quarterback. The same thing applies to significant skill positions. It's going to apply to a defensive end. It's going to apply to an offensive tackle. It's going to apply to a corner. It's going to apply to a wide receiver. It's going to apply to a tight end. These things are going to matter. And so when you take a running back, you are taking one of the most valuable pieces of a first-round pick contract, which is the fifth-year option. And you are choosing to exercise it in a less efficient management way. You're choosing to exercise it in a way that is less beneficial than it otherwise would have been if you would have spent it on a more significant position.
The problem with that argument, the problem with the philosophy and the passion inside of that argument is this, and I see it coming up in the comments section, is this. It's literally, I'm going to go after the edge rusher at 30 or the cornerback at 30 because from a value standpoint, if it hits, it makes way more sense. Meanwhile, the hit percentage is far lower than at running back when you've got a deep squad.
You're going to have to give me stats on that because I don't think that's actually true.
There's no stats that exist. I mean, I
don't think the hit rate on first-round running backs is actually better than the hit rate on first-round.
What is the hit rate on an edge rusher at 30? Like late in the draft. I mean, for God's sake, we traded up to draft John McCargo in the first round, and like he was outplayed by a fifth-round draft pick and Kyle Williams for 12 years. I mean, like we're talking about the difference between running backs translate to the NFL faster, quicker, and more real than almost any other position in the NFL.
The hit rates for running backs aren't better. The hit rates for running backs is not better than other positions. You're right, they translate more, which means they need less of a seasoning time, which means you shouldn't draft one a year before you need one because they come into the league at their athletic prime and you can throw them in.
So what happens when you need
rate on running backs? The hit rate on running backs isn't better.
But what happens when you need one?
Then you can draft one that year in the third round.
Let me give you a number here because I think we're being too kind to the hit rate of running backs. From 2009 to 2016, 13 running backs were taken in the first round of the draft. Only Zeke Elliott is still with his original team. 9 of those 13 are no longer even in the NFL. The others that remain in addition to Zeke Elliott is Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, and Mark Ingram. There's not this tried and true pick a running back in the first round and they're going to be a good player. I don't agree with that. I think you maybe have a better chance. I mean, I did a study on Locked On Bills where I talked about the bottom 25% of the first round and hit rate for defensive ends, and there's no success stories. And you're going to talk to me about TJ Watt. TJ Watt is listed as a linebacker. He's a 3-4 rush linebacker. In terms of true 4-3 defensive ends, go back the last 10 years, you will not find a single hit. You won't find it. So back to what Bruce is saying about the value of that fifth-year option. There's no question that if it is a hit, like let's operate under the assumption that this is a hit. If it winds up being a hit at pick 30, that fifth-year option is significantly more valuable at a different position. But I think there might be an argument to be made that it's a way to keep that running back for longer because no matter if the Bills draft Travis Etienne at 30 and he rushes for 2,000 yards for 5 consecutive seasons and is the NFL MVP twice, I will not be in favor of extending him to a long-term deal. I see. That's my hard and fast rule. You never pay running backs.
Agreed.
So that's where I think there might be an argument to be made that maybe the argument that Bruce is making about the fifth-year option, it does have some value as it relates to running backs because you do buy a little bit more time on a player that you really don't look at as more than a 5-year option for your team.
Maximizing ROI is about getting a player in the first round who you can use the fifth-year option on and extend. Because the longer they're on your team, the better ROI you got on that pick. And that's part of it. And if you have a player who you don't intend to keep for the next 10 years, you don't want to. In fact, you're trying actively to run them into the ground and then let them leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you shouldn't be paying premium prices for them. And premium prices not necessarily being salary. Premium prices being draft capital that you can no longer use on something else because you use it up on a running back. So if we acknowledge these bumpers when it comes to running backs, whether that's my stance of don't use the 5th-year option on him ever, right? Or Joe's maybe use the 5th-year option on him, Joe Marino's maybe use the 5th-year option on him, but never extend them, right? Whatever those bumpers are, as those bumpers squeeze in and in and in and in and in, all of these things have to be perfect. And that leads you to the final point. The final point is, well, we're in a Super Bowl window. It's a luxury pick. This is a really good team. It's a luxury pick. We can do this. This roster's good. That is a level of arrogance that I can't get to. I can't do it. I can't do it. Ask the Chiefs.
I'm not there either.
Ask the Chiefs if they are still really happy about picking Clyde Edwards-Helaire now that they have no tackles.
Ooh, well, they just signed one. Ask
the Chiefs if they're really, really, really happy with their luxury pick. Here's a Bruceism. There are no luxury picks. They don't exist. The minute you take your eye off the ball when it comes to value, you fall behind. You might think you can get a little fast and loose with some of the rules when you get a good team and you're like, man, we were in the AFC Championship game. Look at us. But Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders are both 32 plus. There is a very reasonable chance that this offense in 2022 is in desperate need of a wide receiver. That's a possibility. Emmanuel Sanders is on a 1-year deal, and Cole Beasley's 32 and coming off a broken leg. We all just assume Gabriel Davis is going to be the next 1,000-yard receiver, but what if he's not? All of a sudden, you go into 2022 with maybe a regressing Cole Beasley. Emmanuel Sanders is now 35, and Gabriel Davis may or may not have taken the next step, but even so, he was probably wide receiver 4 this year. You going to bank on him? No. If you draft a wide receiver in the first round this year, you're still better off because what you did was you didn't become a prisoner of the moment.
Right.
You didn't think to yourself that everything's going to work out and you're going to finesse this roster to death. But that's not the way football works. One injury changes things. It's the same reason why I pounded the table for a backup quarterback, because the roster's too good to have Josh Allen go down and have your whole season tanked because he's down for 4 games. Because this idea that everything is going to be absolutely perfect, crystal clear on paper, and it's going to be wonderful forever. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Players are going to leave. Players are going to regress. Brandon Beane signs these players to these contracts that we laud him for because he can get out of them early, right? We always say, hey, it's a really good contract. You can get out of it early. Well, if you need to get out of it early, if you need to actually exercise that option, that's a hole. And holes are created all over the place. There are no teams with no holes. They don't exist. So this argument that this is a really good team, we don't have any holes, go after your Super Bowl, to me, you're just not looking at next year. You're not looking at the year after that. You're not understanding that there are risks associated with having 34-year-old wide receiver 2s and 32-year-old slot receivers coming off broken legs. And both of your pass rushers who start being 30 plus, one of whom is on the way of regression, and one of whom could regress at any moment. We don't think about that. Instead, we just think about right now. Luxury picks are not a thing, because the second you took your eye off the ball and you started thinking, I'm good, I can do whatever I want now, I can get a little cute, you missed out on an opportunity to make your team better.
Bruce, if there's a point that I think I am most hung up on, and I'm certainly wanting your perspective on this, it's when it comes to immediate impact. And we all acknowledge that running backs enter the NFL in their prime. And if the Bills were looking for a player that could actually come in and make an impact with pick 30, it's unlikely to be a defensive lineman. I don't know that it would be an offensive lineman. You're playing the long game with a wide receiver. And again, I probably side with all of these things, right? I don't know that I am in favor of picking this running back at 30. Even if they were to pick a cornerback too, Bruce, you know that Sean McDermott loves Levi Wallace like he's his son. All right. He's a starting cornerback opposite of Trey White this year. Nobody that they're picking at 30 is going to unseat Levi Wallace. Do you not acknowledge that? It's probably the best way to get an immediate impact. And I understand that that's somewhat in the face of everything you just said about being mindful of needs long-term, all that stuff. But do you at least acknowledge that, yeah, there's a chance that this could be the best way for the Bills to get a big-time immediate impact out of pick 30?
Absolutely. I think there's absolutely an argument to be made that if you want someone to come in and immediately provide you with an upgrade at a position, just a position, then you can look at players like, I mean, I'm not a big Matt Hawk fan. You could draft a punter and have an immediate upgrade at starter, right? You can draft a linebacker and have an immediate upgrade over AJ Klein in 3 in base sets. You can draft a CB2, like you said, you probably might not see the field, but Tre'Davious White, walked off the bus as a starter. Tremaine Edmonds walked off the bus as a starter. I understand they weren't competing with Levi Wallace, but I think that there's plenty of positions. I think you could have an interior offensive lineman come in and start over John Feliciano. I think that's a possibility too. But I don't think there's a question. I think you're right that a running back can come in here and walk in the door as RB1. That's a real thing that can happen.
I get a little bit hung up on some of your talking points when as it relates to, I feel like you're lumping running backs into like the same bucket as a run stopping defensive tackle and a Sam linebacker that plays 10 snaps a game, or a punter or a return guy or a long snapper. Like, I mean, a running back, if he's going to be your lead back, I mean, we're talking about a guy that's going to touch the ball 200, 250 times a game. Like, I don't necessarily relate to that talking point that it's the same value as a guy that plays 10 snaps a game on defense or is just an early down run stuffer or is a punter. Like, do you think, I mean, are you willing to acknowledge that maybe that's a little aggressive to put a running back in that same bucket?
They're not in the same bucket. I use them as examples of positions that we globally accept are devalued so that we can start to have a reasonable conversation about the reason why they're devalued, and that those same factors apply to the running back, although in a lesser extent. I agree that running backs are more important. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. It's not just valuable or not valuable. This whole thing is a spectrum. It's one of the reasons why you and I were both completely okay with taking Jonathan Taylor if he was on the board last year in the second round. We were both completely cool with that because running back by committee, which is one of the other things that devalues running backs, by the way, is the running back by committee concept. It devalues running backs. He's going to get 150 to 200 touches. So if you know that those touches were previously going to go to TJ Yeldon, but now they're going to go to Jonathan Taylor, you can sign me up for that. We understand that. So I don't think they are in the same value bucket as punters, kickers, specialists, 2-down thumper linebackers, 2-down thumper defensive tackles. I use those as an example because what happens is people refuse to accept that running backs are less valuable than quarterbacks, wide receivers, offensive linemen, corners, tight ends, safeties, but they don't seem to have trouble accepting that those positions are. And so what I'm drawing this idea that there are positions that are intrinsically less valuable. Why are they intrinsically less valuable? It's because they don't move the needle in the pass game. Then from there you go, running backs don't move the needle in the pass game significantly either. So they can't be as valuable, not in the same bucket as the Star Latules of the world, the 2-down run stuffing defensive tackles. I do think running backs are more valuable than those positions, but they're never going to be as valuable as the positions that move the needle significantly in the most important aspect of the game.
This has been an incredible conversation. Like literally, like the respect that I have for both of you, like, and to me, as debates go, like this has just been bucket filling for me. Does that make sense? Like when I say bucket filling, like this has just been a spirited, fun conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching the Hump Day Hotline on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network. I am joined by guests Joe Marino and Bruce Nolan. Well, I guess Joe Marino's from the Locked On Podcast Network, the Locked On Bills, and then Bruce Exclusive. Bruce Nolan is the host of the Bruce Exclusive. But I'm just like, to me, there's just something about this whole conversation that is like, I have spent all of 2020 talking about the fact that Bills Mafia is living in wildest dreams land. Like, we're sitting here in we're a couple hours from April 1st arguing about whether or not the Bills have the ability or the whatever you want. We're drafting 30, and do we take a running back at 30? Because like this roster is so deep. This team is so good, right? We're chasing two teams, the Chiefs and the Buccaneers. Like, there's just something to be said for like what it is that 20 years, bro. Like bros. Like we lived in freaking purgatory for 20 years. And this is the conversation that we're having.
It's a good problem to have.
Can I go back, Bruce? You mentioned the conversations that you and I had last year about running backs. It was a pick 54 the Bills had, what they wound up picking up in Essa. And you and I were pretty together in that, all right now this is Devin Singletary, TJ Yeldon, 150 touches a year. That didn't move the needle for us. And so we were thinking, okay, yeah, give us Jonathan Taylor. We like J.K. Dobbins. We like Cam Akers. I'm sure there's another good running back that I'm not thinking of right now. But like we were thinking that this is a great way to upgrade the football team. And I know that's a different conversation because it's pick 54 versus pick 30. Mm-hmm. The part of the reason we're having this conversation right now is because they drafted Zach Moss. And we both like Zach Moss. You and I mean, just to be completely transparent, we did after the draft, and we'll do it again this year, who we would have picked if we were in Brandon Beane's shoes. And neither one of us changed our mind on Zach Moss in the third round. Mm-hmm. The problem is that it feels like the more that we look into this and we realize that Devin Singletary was really aided as a rookie. I mean, he tied Derrick Henry for guys with over 150 rushing attempts in 2019. He was tied for the league lead in yards per attempt, right there with Derrick Henry. And the reason for that is because he faced the highest percentage of light boxes in the NFL, and this guy was just feasting because nobody was in the box. And Frank Gore was doing this downhill banger roll that he was, really doing the dirty work when it comes to the offense. And I think we maybe convinced ourselves that, Zach Moss can come in and do that at the same level as Frank Gore did. And, Devin Singletary can continue to feast on these light boxes. Well, now at least I feel differently, right? Because I'm down on Devin Singletary right now. And look, there's certain weeks where I might be convinced that Moss is the better back, Singletary is the better back. I'm anxious to see Zach Moss next year when he's healthy and has a normal onboarding process to learn the playbook and get familiar and see what he can do. But like, what is your confidence level right now going into this year? Let's assume that it's Moss, Singletary, Breida. I mean, is this the right makeup back there? Are you looking for anything to upgrade in this backfield? Like, how do you tie all of these layers together, considering where we were last year, the conversations we had, what's happened, where we are now? Like, how do you make sense of all of it?
I'm completely fine going into the year with Singletary, Breida, and Zach Moss. I'm completely cool with that. I was always of the opinion that the interior guard play that the Bills got from Cody Ford and then Ike Butker and John Feliciano when he came back and Brian Winters before he was benched, all of these things, plus the sudden love affair that Brian Daboll had with zone running, those two things contributed far more to the rushing failures than running backs. I'm not saying that running backs didn't have their moment. If you do plurality pie when you're sitting there, and you're going, okay, what percentage of the rushing successes and failures are associated with each individual thing, then I would probably go offensive line, scheme, running backs in that order. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at things like that, and I want to move the needle in the running game, I don't look to the running backs to do it. I look to Brian Daboll to go back to a little bit more of the man gap power scheme that he used in 2019 and a little bit away from the zone stuff. But if you want to keep doing the zone stuff, now at least you have a zone runner with Matt Breida to be able to do it with. Right. So I think having a complementary piece in the backfield who runs the outside zone, he does in Shanahan, and then he goes to, of course, Chan Gailey's offense in Miami, who runs gap power all the time and spreads you horizontally. That was a weird fit from the beginning. Matt Breida and Chan Gailey's offense was a weird fit from the beginning. And so I think that if you have your designated zone runner, right, with Matt Breida, and you get back to having Devin Singletary do the things that Devin Singletary was effective at, and you continue to be able to run 11 and 10 personnel to be able to lighten those boxes, then I think you're going to be able to see more success in the running backs without necessarily needing to invest significant assets in the position.
That's good. Well, we have literally come full circle here on the Hump Day Hotline with Joe Marino from the Locked On Bills podcast and Bruce Nolan from the Bruce Exclusive. And gentlemen, are you guys open to taking some questions from the comment section? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, the first one we got is from Chris Jenke, the real Chris Jenke. And Bruce, this question is for you. He says, question for Bruce. How would you compare Matt Breida's skill set to former Bill Mike Gillislee? The more I read about him, the more he sounds like Gillislee, and not in a bad way.
That's actually a really funny comparison. I actually don't think that's a bad comparison at all. Gillislee, same kind of player, foot in the ground, hit the gas and let's go. Right. Gillislee wasn't quite as fast as Breida. Gillislee was like a mid 4.5 guy. He just looked fast, but he actually wasn't as fast as Breida. I think that Breida is Mike Gillislee on steroids, metaphorically speaking, not literally speaking, because performance enhancing drugs are bad. Kids, don't do those things. Stay away from drugs, kids. I do think that stylistically, it's a good comparison. I think Breida's faster.
Awesome. So ladies and gentlemen who are in the comments and watching this live, we are now taking questions. And I've got some preloaded here because I put it in the comment section that we're about to. Joe Marino, I'm going to give this one to you. Grant Turner asks, question, who would need to be off the board for ETN to be the best option of value, sorry. CB5 in the draft, pass rush 5, where is the line? So I guess the question is everybody's gone, right? And now it's at the point where, like, from a BPA standpoint, meshed with it. Obviously, we know that, like, it's BPA and needs. It's never all BPA. It's never all needs. So who would have to be off the board for ETN to be the guy that the Bills go after?
Well, I mean, that's a challenging question. I would say that there would have to be all the corners that I wouldn't be comfortable picking at 30. There would have to be all the edge defenders I wouldn't be comfortable picking at 30. All of the wide receivers, which is a long list, that I wouldn't be comfortable picking at 30, and maybe even some offensive line options. So, I mean, there's a math problem here for me, because there's going to be one of those players available, especially when you consider, that there's 5 quarterbacks that are going to come off the board before the Bills pick. Kyle Pitts is going to be off the board. There's going to be a player that I'm going to like more at a different position than ETN. So that's why I don't know that I would ever be able to pull the trigger on this, because there's only 29 players that can come off the board. I'm going to get a corner, an edge, a receiver, an offensive lineman that I like better.
Right.
So.
Right. Very good. Anthony Romeo says Bruce is Brandon Beane. That's exactly what Brandon Beane said in his end of year presser. So is there something we need to know here, Bruce? Are you Brandon Beane in disguise, and somehow you've managed to change your voice to the point where nobody knows who you are?
I mean, you've never seen me and Brandon Beane in the same place at the same time, but no. If I am indeed Brandon Beane, that I am a little bit. I do have some split personality disorder, because there are moments when I disagree with myself.
That's very good. Intimidator J asks, can you see the Bills drafting a slot wide receiver, 3rd to 5th round, wide receiver Daz Newsome, Demetric Felton, Amari Rogers, Dwayne? I don't know why he capitalized all of Dwayne Estridge, etc. Either of you can take that question.
Joe,
the only one of those I'd be interested in is Amari Rogers. Estridge, 24-year-old converted cornerback to receiver, really struggles with ball skills and hands. I think he's a very limited route runner. I think he's just a fast guy. I'm not high on him. Demetric Felton, not in on him at all. Body catching slot receiver, not big enough to play between the tackles, won't help you on teams. I think he's bottom of the roster type player that, especially on this Bills roster, I don't see a course for him. Daz Newsome, small, slow, no length. I mean, he's the most interesting. Maybe later in the draft I can get behind that, but Amari Rogers would be the one guy here that would move the needle for me.
Very good. Very good. It's amazing to me, the fact that you have the capacity to remember all of these draft picks. Like, how much do you retain year to year? Like, I remember the guy that I scouted 4 years ago. Like, how much of that exists in your brain?
I don't know. It's what I do, man. It's the job, right? So, I mean, how do you know the chords to every song ever? You know what I mean? Like, we all have our own little niches in life. And
that's
so
funny. It's funny.
yeah.
The brains definitely work different. Leo Phillips, welcome to the show. Thank you for the question. If Horn is there at 30, do we take him or will he not start over Levi? I don't remember which one of you said. Oh, it was Joe said that McDermott loves Levi. More than likely, it's because he's a great practice player. Because McDermott has said that about certain guys before, Brian Winters, as far as that goes. But if Horn is there at 30, do we take him or will he not start over Levi?
You take him, and you need to probably have him start over Levi. I think that Horn's going to have a developmental curve. I took a lot of heat for having Horn as a first-round pick, but actually having him as CB7 on my list because he's crazy grabby. I mean, he's really, really grabby. He is an extremely significant athlete. I have a bias when it comes to corners. I like physical but technical. That's just the way it is. It's the reason why Patrick Surtain is CB1 for me. JC Horn is an extremely talented athlete in man coverage, who I think he gets his chronology wrong. Playing corner is a lot like playing offensive tackle. Feet, then hands, feet, then hands, feet, then hands. And sometimes when that chronology gets thrown off, you end up getting grabby. Yeah. And you're not, sometimes you have players who can get away with it in college because they're so good athletically that they can get away with their technique being garbage. JC Horn's one of those players. He's such an unbelievable athlete that he can just get away with stuff that nobody else can get away with. So he's so athletic that you almost have to start him over Levi Wallace just because of the options he gives you. The options you have with JC Horn on the field to be able to play combo coverages and play a little bit more man are things that Levi Wallace just physically was not gifted by God to be able to do. It's just, he just can't do them. So if he's there at 30, yeah, you take him, and yeah, you start him.
I want to ask Bruce a follow-up on Horn because I really love Bruce's defensive back takes. I was listening to Bob Morris talk about scouting cornerbacks. He's a longtime NFL scout and renowned for his work on defensive backs. And he said something that really resonated with me when he was talking about some guys that he watched in 2017. He said, one thing that I look for in cornerbacks is athletic confidence. That ability, that trust that you have that, yeah, I do have the foot speed, I have the hips, and I can turn and run with this player and remain in phase and not get grabby, right? Anybody can watch JC Horn's tape and realize that this is a guy that's grabby when he's trying to stay in phase in the man coverage. Like, he just does that. And I think for as good as his athletic testing was, it was tremendous. I became more concerned about that athletic confidence. Not that JC Horn doesn't play for an edge and he's, a really passionate competitor. Like, you definitely get that. But when I see the timed measurements in terms of athletic testing and I see the grabbiness on tape, I get concerned that he doesn't have that athletic confidence at this point.
I never heard that term, athletic confidence, until you just said it. But it reminds me a little bit of the things
Joeism. It's a Joeism.
The things that you see defensive coaches talk about all the time when you say, well, he's learned the system. He doesn't have to think so much. He can just play fast. You see people talk about that all the time when it comes to defensive coaches. He doesn't have to think anymore. He can just play fast. And that's what you see in a corner when they have confidence in their technique. When they have confidence that I know my hip elevation's right. I know that I'm turning at the appropriate moment. I know what's developing in front of me. I know where my eyes are supposed to be. I know these things. And you see that in their body language. And that's kind of what you're talking about, is that you see that in the idea that I know where I'm supposed to be. And because of that, I can allow my feet to do the talking. And so earlier when I said, feet then hands, feet then hands, feet then hands, as a general rule, if your feet are good enough, the more feet you have to use, the less hands you have to use. And it's similar like that when you talk about offensive tackles, right? If you have someone who can, you ever watch Tevin? Oh, of course you do. You watch Tevin Jenkins, okay? So Tevin Jenkins is the meanest guy you've ever seen on the field, like just completely unassuming offensive tackle from Oklahoma State. And then when you watch him on the field and he jump sets out in front of a defensive end, and the defense is like, whoa, he's up on me, and then all of a sudden he's at the water boy. Like, that's what happens. The last thing that defensive end remembers was the quarterback saying hike, and then all of a sudden Tevin Jenkins is in front of them with his jump set, and then he's on his back. And right. Tevin Jenkins is laying over top of him. Like, that's the way that this happens. And it's because the feet went before the hands. You didn't lunge at a player. You let your feet get you in position, and then you punched them. It's the same thing with JC Horn. And so when I see grabbiness, I've never even heard the phrase athletic confidence until now. But I feel like we all just kind of understand that. We just didn't really put a name on it until Joe just said it.
Well, credit Bob Morris. I never heard it before. And I think I don't know that it's the same thing as trusting your technique. I think that's a different thing. But like when you're the caliber of athlete that JC Horn is, like, brother, you can turn and run with guys. Like you have the explosiveness. You have the long speed. Why are you grabbing? Athletic confidence. And you can see this. It's not even guys that necessarily are great athletes, like guys that step on the field. Think about Patrick Mahomes. He steps on the field. That guy knows that he's that dude, right? Like there's nobody that's going to mess with him because he has the traits to do whatever the hell he wants to do on the football field. And I think as soon as I heard that phrase, it really kind of dialed me in on that when I'm watching football players, because I think it matters a lot.
So would you reckon it to like Malik Hooker? Like when he was at OSU, like there was a great deal of like he didn't have the greatest form in the world. There was just something about like he knew he was better than, right? Like the guys coming at him, right? That's the first thing I thought of.
Bruce, what do you think? You watch more Hooker than I do.
I watched a lot of Malik.
Yeah.
Malik Hooker had rare understanding of space. And we talk about that a lot. We talk a lot about playing well in space, and he had the Micah Hyde trait.
Right.
That Micah Hyde trait where you just intrinsically know that the velocity of this ball is going to get it here at this time, and I'm X amount of distance. It's like doing long division and geometry in your head, right? And he had a tremendous understanding of space, and he was really, really athletic. He just massive injury problems, and he's too much. Safeties need to be dynamic in multiple ways in the NFL right now. One of the things that makes Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde so effective is that they're interchangeable. And Malik Hooker's not somebody I want down in the box. He is a single high or split safety only kind of player. And he's not someone you can bring. I don't want him in man coverage on a tight end. I don't want him down in the box attacking downhill a la Bob Sanders. I don't want any of those things out of him. So can you be a specialist safety? Not when the purpose of being a safety is being non-specialist. That's the value in being a good safety, is not being a specialist, because we've talked about this before. Specialists are predictable. Right. And on defense, you can't have predictable specialists.
Right. Very good.
Man, I remember watching Hooker, and I didn't have a first-round grade on Malik Hooker, and I had a lot of other safeties higher rated than him, and I was like, I think the only thing that this guy does at a high level is defend deep zones, and I'm not sure that's good enough.
Right.
Like I'm sure, certainly he made plays on the ball, and that matters a lot, but like plays on the ball in deep zones, like that, you got to check more boxes.
For sure. A couple more questions. Troy Garman asks, if traded, who would get more value back to the Bills, Moss or Singletary?
Oh, geez. What? Oh, man, that's brutal. That's a brutal question. I'm going to go. It's brutal, not because it's a bad question. It's brutal because it's hard. I'm going to say Moss. I'm going to say Moss because his athletic profile is better. He is 1 year less removed in his rookie contract. And I think that the running back class that he came from was a little different than the running back class that Devin Singletary came from. Singletary is a bad athlete from a testing standpoint. And when he got taken, I said, you have to hope he's Devonta Freeman. That was the ceiling comp. My absolute ceiling comp for Devin Singletary was Devonta Freeman. And if that's as high as you can go because athleticism limits you above that, that's not a great spot to be in. So I'm going to say that Moss would return more because has more time remaining on his rookie contract and he's a better athlete.
Can I spike the football a little bit?
Absolutely.
Go for it, Gronk. Gronk spike.
I remember when the Bills drafted Devin Singletary, and I remember hosting the Locked On Bills podcast and talking about my concerns with Devin Singletary. And I remember being met with a lot of criticism because I questioned his athletic profile. And people were after me. He's like, oh, Joe, he's a third-round pick in the NFL. This guy's a good athlete. You know, like, there's no way that he doesn't have great athleticism. Like, what are you talking about? You know, Brandon Beane said that if you watch his tape, it's extremely fun, right? It is. It's extremely fun. At FAU, when he's making tacklers from Tulsa and Tulane miss, right? Like, you watch this guy and you're like, wow, he's kind of short and he doesn't have great size or power. Like, he's doing fun things. He's just not moving very fast. like his tracks were always goofy, right? A lot of horizontal tracks with the football. And you start to think about, all right, well, no longer is this an insurance salesman that's pursuing him from Memphis. It's friggin' Deion Jones and Jerome Baker and NFL football players. Like it was fair to question Devin Singletary's style combined with his athletic profile and how it would translate to the NFL. Now everybody understands that Devin Singletary is he's in neutral. He doesn't have a second gear. The guy's just in neutral all the time. And that's the problem with Jarrett Patterson from Buffalo this year.
I think
he's discount Devin Singletary, and that's not a good thing.
I think the problem that I have with that conversation, and I agree with you, I don't disagree. And this is where this goes back to what we talked about a half hour ago when Bruce said that, like, you know, we had the best offensive like team or outing for the Buffalo Bills ever in the history with these two running backs. Devin Singletary at least has that dead leg. He's got moves. He's got things that can make guys miss. Zach Moss, to me, is the guy that, like, I can turn left into the hole or I can turn right into the guy trying to tackle me, and I turn right into the guy that tackles me every time. Like,
how do you reconcile, Bruce? How do you reconcile that? Because I liked Moss at Utah. Like, I didn't expect this.
For me, I do think early foot injuries can do that to you, because I really think that if you look at the reason why Zach Moss wasn't as effective as we otherwise would have, and you think to yourself, okay, you know, some of that pop that you get from lateral quickness that you see from Devin Singletary all the time, that play that he runs off left tackle against the Steelers and he seemingly has eyes in the back of his head and stops and makes a quick jump cut. That's the type of explosive pop that you don't get if you have a bum foot. And I'm just, sample size is important when you're hurt. So we just finished talking about Zach Moss and running backs being able to come in and be immediate impact players. Do we not accept that your level of immediate impact would be lessened if you've got a bad foot? For me, it's a little bit like Tremaine Edmonds and the shoulder, right? You might say to yourself, like, one of the things we talked about all year long was, well, yeah, Tremaine Edmonds got a shoulder, but what does that have to do with the struggles I'm seeing from Tremaine Edmonds? And we said, well, you know, if you're trying to manipulate your body to take on less contact at that shoulder, then your tackling efficiency is probably going to be worse. And you're going to be subconsciously trying to avoid contact from blockers coming downhill to try and take your head off. All those things apply to Zach Moss in the foot too, I think.
There's just not a whole lot. One game. We got one game to see Antonio Williams. There's just not a whole lot that Zach Moss is bringing to this offense that Antonio Williams is not going to bring the exact same thing, plus some, because the dude really wants to be on the football field.
Well, if I want to continue believing in Zach Moss, which there's no reason to write him off, I'm certainly going to cling to what Bruce said there, that, you know, turf toe right off the bat for the guy, you know, certainly put him behind. And then you have an offensive line where your best five never took a snap together. Right. You know what I mean? Like they had scheme issues all year long with it. So, I mean, there was a lot of ingredients working together that were working against Zach Moss. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, I'm more optimistic about Moss next year than I am Singletary.
Sure. Anthony Romeo has asked me if I saw this question. I thought this was just a question for the comments, so I'm going to ask it to you guys. How much difference is there between Rb1 and Rb10 in this draft? There are multiple other opportunities to draft a valuable RB running back. I don't see that at other positions: edge, cornerback, O-line, after rounds 1 and 2.
I think there's a monumental drop off. I think you have 3 top backs this year: Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, Alabama, Javonte Williams. If I go to my 10th running back at the Draft Network, 1, 2.
Did we lose Joe?
Yep, I think we lost Joe.
Oh, he'll be back in a second.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Bruce?
No, I actually agree. I agree with Joe. I think that there is a big drop off here. And what happens is you go from the do-it-all running backs to the specialists. You get to the Javian Hawkinses of the world out of Louisville. And, you know, Javian Hawkins is a fun watch, but he's Anthony McFarland again. Do you remember Anthony McFarland out of Maryland?
Oh, yeah.
Anthony McFarland, he got drafted by the Steelers in the 4th round, I think. And he's backing up Benny Snell now. Benny Snell, the plotter from Kentucky. He's backing up because Anthony McFarland being fast is important, and that's wonderful, but there's a lot more to being a running back than being fast. And
Right.
if it was just about being fast, then, Anthony McFarland's of the world and the Javian Hawkinses of the world would be first-round picks. Not for me, but for somebody else. And I think that really what you have is you have 3 running backs who can come in and really do it all. They can be bell cows if you have a bell cow style system, which, mind you, the Bills don't. Sean McDermott has openly said it is not good for one person to get all the carries. So if you invest a significant amount of premium in running back, know full well that you are also handicapping that by usage. Just know that you're doing that, because Sean McDermott has flat out said it's not good for one running back to handle all the carries. He used this as an excuse to continue to give carries to Frank Gore, who was woefully ineffective at the time, over a more effective Devin Singletary. When asked about it, he openly said it's not good for one person to run the ball. And if he used that as an example as to why you shouldn't give Singletary more carries, then he's going to use it again. So if you invest significant capital for this Buffalo Bills team in a running back, know that you're getting 50% or 40% of the total carries from that running back.
I'm going to answer this question for Phil. Phil asked, do you believe that the Bills will pay over $35 million per year for Josh Allen? The answer is yes. Question from JLJO. What round would you be comfortable with the Bills spending on Javian Hawkins?
He's a 4th or 5th round guy. He's mid day 3. He's a specialist.
It's funny, these names I don't know. Eric Sweat, welcome to the show, Eric. Good to see you again, brother. Would the Bills dare at 30 pick Pat Freiermuth or Brevian Jordan with no glaring holes, or CB2 and pass rush more pressing?
I think Freiermuth is a day 2 guy. I think he's a complete tight end, but I don't think the same level of upside is there that you see from tight ends necessary to go in the first round. Brevin Jordan is extremely raw. The vast majority of all Brevin Jordan's targets were within 4 yards of the line of scrimmage.
Wow.
He was a bubble screen tight end, and he's not even that good of an athlete. So I'm not all the way out on Brevin Jordan, but I'm most of the way out on Brevin Jordan.
We are going really long, but we're almost done. Tom Colling asks, anyone you guys would trade up for? If so, how high would you go for, and for how much? So who's a guy that you would jump up and get, and what would you be willing to pay?
I wouldn't be willing to jump up high, because I don't want to give up. I just finished going off on this huge rant about how luxury picks aren't a thing, and you have to make sure that you plan. So if that's the case, then clearly I'm not team trade all your assets and go up. Obviously,
thank you for not being a politician. I appreciate that.
So I'm not going to be. I'm not going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. But if I were to trade up, I mean, you have to think you're trying to get somebody who can come in and be dynamic at an area of need. So Jalen Phillips would be someone who, if he fell to the 20s and you wanted to move up a couple spots to make sure that you get one of the rare edge rusher classes, this is not a great edge rusher class. And if Jalen Phillips happens to be there, it's a rare opportunity. You don't get players like that often. The only reason he might even be available is because of some off the field concerns and because of some concerns about his concussion history. Right. Caleb Farley, if he starts to fall because of the back injury, he's my CB2 in the class. If he fell to the mid 20s, I think about it.
Awesome. Chris E asks, since the roster is pretty much set, could you see the Bills trading up on multiple times to get like 3 good players that can make an impact in this draft and trading away the rest of the picks? Probably not, would be my guess.
Could I see it? No, I couldn't see it because Brandon Beane's aggressive, but he's not that aggressive. That's a borderline reckless move. And Brandon Beane has always been aggressive, but he's been responsibly aggressive. When he traded up for Josh Allen, he didn't trade away future picks. And that was really important because we needed that pick to trade for, Stephon Diggs. We needed that player to be able to contribute to talent around him. So he's been aggressive without being reckless. And I think that would probably classify as being reckless, which I don't think the Bills would do.
I saw a question about, are the Bills interested? Oh, here's from Stephen Lynn. Are the Bills interested in former Jets linebacker we brought to the practice squad this year, the former first round pick? I don't know who he's talking about.
He's talking about Darren Lee, who ended up, Darren Lee was a run and chase linebacker. He had speed coming out of college. He was an Ohio State guy, so I watched a lot of Darren Lee, but there was always a processing issue for Darren Lee. Darren Lee, the best way to think about it is, do you remember the linebacker that the Bills drafted out of the University of Florida just a couple years ago? I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. And it's driving me absolutely. Voshon Joseph is his name. Voshon Joseph was a C-ball get ball. The fact that I forgot his name tells you something.
You forgot it in about 3 seconds, and you had it right back there. Like it came right back to you.
Voshon Joseph was C-ball get ball. And as long as he didn't have to process anything in front of him, he was okay.
Right.
Darren Lee's that, but more athletic. So if you are able to get something from Darren Lee, I consider that a success, but I wouldn't count on it.
Gotcha. Last question for the night, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching the Hump Day Hotline on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network. I'm joined by my guest, Bruce Nolan, and we are long past the debate and the heated, passionate discussion that I would probably say at this point, I would say you won. And the reason that I would say you won is because Joe Marino, who was supposed to be on my side throughout the whole, like, running backs that actually didn't make it in the first round. But anyways, Daniel Gowris, who is my guy, asked, where do you see Joseph Asai, edge rusher from Texas, going in the draft? Is he a possible fit for the Buffalo Bills defense?
I like Asai a lot more as a 3-4 stand-up rusher than I do as a 4-3 base defensive end.
That's big. There's a whole show to be done on 3-4 versus 4-3 as far as like there is a difference. They're not the same. Hybrids don't mean that they're the same. And like if a guy's a 3-4 guy, he's not a 3-4-3, and if he's a 4-3 guy, he's not a 3-4. Go ahead.
He's not overly twitchy, and he uses his length well, and that's good. I think that's important. And you can make do with long-armed edge defenders who can use their length well. Like if you can do that, you can have a spot in this league for a long time just based on that trait. And so I think Osai is a day 2 guy. I wouldn't be upset by any means. I think he translates a little bit better to a 3-4, but I wouldn't be mad.
Right. Gotcha. Bruce Nolan, bringing all the fire tonight on the Hump Day Hotline, and I feel bad, and I apologize that we lost Joe Marino mid-sentence, and he actually didn't make it back. So I don't know if his internet is down, if his computer crashed, or what. But Bruce, do the listeners a favor, and there's a bunch of them. Tell them where to find you.
Well, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Bruce Exclusive. My show, The Bruce Exclusive, which you are listening to right now as part of this, drops on Thursdays and Fridays on the Buffalo Rumblings Podcast Network. And you will continue to find me yelling about not taking running backs in the first round.
I'm the alpha, lady! I'm the omega, baby!
I just can't get enough.
Just had to get it.
Can't get enough of it. I'm sorry that I'm driving and I keep rolling that in there. But yes, and ladies and gentlemen, you have been watching the Hump Day Hotline on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network. I am your host of the Hump Day Hotline, Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired. I'm also the host of the Overreaction podcast that airs live on Sunday nights here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And then it obviously drops on Monday mornings, Monday afternoon, somewhere around 12 o'clock on the Buffalo Rumblings podcast network. Bruce, this has been fun. Like, this has been a good time. Like, this was this is one of those times for me where it's like I had this feeling last week when Spence and I did the Hump Day Hotline. It was just like, man, that episode was fire. Like, there was just, the content was great. And it like the comment section, I don't know if you've been watching it, has been filled up with just people saying like this episode has just been incredible. So thank you. Let me just say thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Did I render you speechless? Like, is that what just happened there? No?
I don't get rendered speechless. I do occasionally leave myself on mute, though.
I do see you pop up mute more than anybody I've ever seen. Like, you literally like run with the mute button often. But thank you for joining me. Thank you for sitting in for Spence tonight, who was I thought he was traveling, but he was clearly parked somewhere. I don't know where he was parked just before he ended our show. But for myself, for Bruce, for everybody involved, Bruce, give me a go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills. We'll talk to you guys on the flip side. Until next time, I'll see you Sunday night. We'll see you Wednesday night. We'll see you coming up. There's a lot of good stuff coming up this offseason. The draft is April 29th, I believe. And all of these questions that we have are going to be answered. Until then, this is Joe Miller signing off for the Hump Day Hotline. Love you guys. We'll talk to you